So I'll start off with a few words about Hans Kung and the global ethic. And Dr. Dogan will follow me. Do you want to say a few words about yourself, Dr. Dogan, before I start?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Recep Dogan. I have a master's and PhD in Islamic theology. I used to teach in Australia, Charles Sturt University. After, the spending too much time in universities as an academic, I decided to change my subject. Now I work as cybersecurity analysis. Still, I do academic things as just on volunteer base. I live in Orange County. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I can.
You'll be, Dr. Dogan will give us a formal presentation a little bit later. So, Susanna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, I belong to the one in Irvine. Actually, now they are in Irvine, and I've been going there for a few years. Except during COVID, I didn't go. I'm actually a retired teacher.
Well, thank you. I'll tell you what, we will come back to everybody who didn't get a chance to speak before, when we go to the question and answer, but I think we'll start to the presentation on Hans Kung and the global ethic. And I'll start with a few words about my involvement with Hans Kung. I first got to know Hans Kung many, many years ago when he was a young theologian, and he wrote the book Council, Reform, and Reunion, which was a book on the Vatican Council II, which was about to start in the 1960s. And he became one of the leading theologians in the Vatican II era. He was based at Tübingen University in Germany. And his initial work was primarily within the ecumenical dialogue between Protestantism and Catholicism. He wrote the famous book on justification on Karl Barth, the great Protestant theologian. And so his early part of his career was as a Catholic theologian. He also was got to know the Pope Benedict, the future Pope Benedict, who was also on the same faculty of theology in Tübingen. And then when later when Pope John Paul became the Pope for the Catholic Church, Hans Kung started to branch out into, you might say, more progressive forms of theology and questioned the infallibility of the Pope. He wrote a famous book called Infallibility and Inquiry. And this got him into some trouble with the Catholic hierarchy. And eventually it led to his forceful removal as a Catholic theologian. But this did not end his career as a theologian. He continued more or less teaching, but more from outside of the Catholic approval, even though he never was his priesthood and his title as a theologian never was taken away from him, but he just was not allowed to teach Catholic theology anymore. So he branched out and started to work in a much broader framework of world religions. And he started to study all the world religions. Particularly, he began, I would say, probably focusing on the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In fact, later in his life, he wrote 3 massive tomes, which I've got all 3, in which he 800-page books on Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And so his focus for a long time was on the monotheistic religions. But then he went even broader and he started working with the Parliament of World Religions. And that's kind of where he got involved with the reconstructing of the Parliament in 1993. I don't know if many of you know that the Parliament was first started in 1893. And in the early 1990s, a group of scholars got together and said, gee, it would be nice, it's the 100th anniversary of the Parliament of Religions, to have it reconstituted and basically to restart this whole movement of world religions. So in 1993, they invited Hans Kung to develop what's called a declaration toward a global ethic. And this became a foundational document for the Parliament of Religions. In fact, if you go to the Parliament of Religions site, which is meeting in Chicago in August 14th to the 18th, you will see the story of the global ethic, the Declaration of the Global Ethic. And so that became Kung's major contribution to restarting the Parliament of Religions. He was the architect, you might say, of this document, which basically was similar to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but a little different. As you know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was in 1948, I believe, under the inspiration of the United Nations. And so he wanted something that was more based upon the unanimity of the world's religious traditions, whereas the declaration of the global program, the other one coming from the UN, was more based upon the Enlightenment philosophy that came out of that period of, you might say, reaction to religion, whereas Kung felt that religion, particularly the world's religions, had something to offer to a development of what he called a global ethic. So the initial program of the Parliament was based upon this global ethic. So, Rachel, bring up that global ethic, if you wouldn't mind. Do you have your computer open?
Yes.
If you just put in your computer, I had to switch computers because mine went out on me upstairs. If you could just put in Declaration of a Global Ethic and see if you can pull it up on your computer, and I can just show everybody what it is. It's basically 5 directives now, at least 5, which came out of that meeting in 1993 at the Parliament of Religions. And it has served as a basis for not only the Parliament, but for other groups that have taken it up and tried to use it as a framework to pursue a global formula that people could agree to, coming from many different religious traditions, with the idea that most of the world, even though we're secular in many respects, most of the world does have within each border of each country, a group of people who belong to one or more of the world religions, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Confucianism, Taoism, Jain. There's probably 20 now religions that are pretty universal and practiced at different parts of the world. And so he was trying to draw from all of these traditions and see if there could be an agreement among religious and philosophers, religious scholars. So he worked on this for basically about a year in preparation for the Parliament of Religions, and was approved then by the Parliament in 1993. I don't know if you're able to look up the Declaration of a Global Ethic. Richard. Be able to find it, Recep?
I'm looking. Can you email me? So I'm just.
I'll tell you what, I think I can get it. If you don't mind, I'm going to come out of my screen for a moment and go to. Coming. Okay, I have it now. I'm going to bring it up here if I can. Can everybody see what is a global ethic?
Not coming out.
Is it coming up?
No, we're not seeing anything except, oh, there it
Oh,
Oh,
goes.
no, yeah, it is
Now
now.
we got it. Now we got it. Yeah.
Okay. So let me minimize this. Okay, what is the global ethic? I'll read from this is from the Parliament of Religion. The global ethic is a landmark declaration of the Parliament of World Religions stating the universal values and principles shared by the world's religions, spiritual and cultural traditions. Though it emerged from consultations with scholars and religious leaders from many of the world's religions and regions, the global ethic is a statement of basic ethical commitments shared by people throughout the globe, religious or not. I should make a point that this document doesn't have any reference to the existence of God. In other words, so like certain Buddhist groups would not have, do not have necessarily a belief in God, but so it basically tries to word in such a way that anybody who has an ethical compass in their religious tradition could agree to it. So let's see. Okay. Here it says, read the global ethic. Can everybody see this now?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the principles of the global ethic. Hopefully it's going to come up here. I'm only going to go over the main principles, which are called the directives of the global ethic. I'll read through this if that's okay, and you can watch it. You can see it also. The declaration of a global ethic. The world is in agony. The agony is so pervasive and urgent that we are compelled to name its manifestations so that the depth of this pain may be made clear. Peace eludes us. The planet is being destroyed. Neighbors live in fear. Women and men are estranged from each other and children die. This is abhorrent. We condemn the abuses of Earth's ecosystems. We condemn the poverty that stifles life's potential, the hunger that weakens the human body, the economic disparities that threaten so many families with ruin. We condemn the social disarray of the nations, the disregard for justice, which pushes citizens to the margin, the anarchy overtaking our communities, and the insane death of children from violence. And particularly we condemn aggression and hatred in the name of religion. But this agony need not be. Excuse me. It need not be because the basis for an ethic already exists. This ethic offers the possibility of a better individual and global order and leads individuals away from despair and societies away from chaos. We are women and men who have embraced the precepts and practices of the world's religions. We affirm that a common set of core values is found in the teachings of the religions and that these form the basis of a global ethic. We affirm that this truth is already known, but yet to be lived in heart and action. We affirm that there is an irrevocable, unconditional norm for all the areas of life, for families, and communities, for races, nations, and religions. There already exist ancient guidelines for the human behavior, which are found in the teachings of the religions of the world and which are conditions for a sustainable world order. We declare we are interdependent. Each of us depends on the well-being of the whole. So we have respect for the community of living beings, for people, animals, and plants, and for the preservation of the earth, air, water, and soil. We take individual responsibility for all we do. All our decisions, actions, and failures to act have consequences. We must treat each other as we wish others to treat us. We make commitments to respect life and dignity, individuality and diversity, so that every person is treated humanely without exception. We must have patience and acceptance. We must be able to forgive, learning from the past, but never allowing ourselves to be enslaved by enemies of hate. Opening our hearts to one another, we must sink our narrow differences for the cause of our world community, practicing a culture of solidarity and relatedness. We consider humankind our family. We must strive to be kind and generous. We must not live for ourselves alone, but should serve others, never forgetting the children, the aged, the poor, the suffering, the disabled, the refugees, and the lonely. No person should ever be considered or treated as second-class citizens, be exploited in any way whatsoever. There should be equal partnership between men and women. We must not commit any kind of sexual immorality. We must put behind us all forms of domination or abuses. We commit ourselves to a culture of nonviolence, respect, justice, and peace. We shall not oppress, injure, torture, or call other human beings, forsaking violence as a means of settling differences. We must strive for a just social and economic order in which everyone has an equal chance to reach full potential as a human being. We must speak and act truthfully and with compassion, dealing fairly with all, avoiding prejudice and hatred. We must not steal. We must move beyond the dominance of greed and power, prestige, money, and consumption, to make a just and peaceful world. Earth cannot be changed for the better unless the consciousness of individuals is changed. First, we pledge to increase our awareness by disciplining our minds, by meditation, by prayer, or by positive thinking. Without a risk and readiness to sacrifice, there can be no fundamental change in our situation. Therefore, we commit ourselves to this global ethic, to understanding one another, and to socially beneficial, peace-fostering, and nature-friendly way of life. We invite all people, whether religious or not, to do the same. So that is the global ethic that I just read to you. You can find this global ethic also at the Parliament of World Religions site. In fact, Global Ministries University has a delegation going to the Parliament meeting in August 13th to the 18th. And we will be presenting there at the Parliament. But there's also going to be several plenary assemblies on the global ethic. And they've added another directive on the environment to go with what I just read to you. So it's one of the foundational documents of the new Parliament, which is celebrating now its 40th anniversary of being reconstituted after 1993. So I will stop there and ask Dr. Dogan to, if you don't mind, Dr. Dogan, share your presentation that you prepared for this meeting.
Sure.
Presents, I will have some questions based upon Hans Kung Global Ethic that Dr. Sterling Harwood presented to me. He cannot be with us, but he prepared some 8 questions based upon his reading of this material.
Yeah. Let's see.
So you can put up your slides. They should come up now, Dr. Dogan.
Let me see if, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So my PowerPoint slides, you're able to see?
You might make it a little larger by hitting the button. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Professor Grudzen, for giving me this, opportunity to present what's Islamic ethics or morality. There are some, Arabic words or some concepts in the Quran, Holy Quran, or the Islamic scripture. It's related to the ethics. They are like maruf. Maruf is then approved, or what is known, well known, or well accepted. Khair meaning the what's good or goodness. Haq is right or truth. Be righteousness. qist, equity, or adala. There are, but none of them in reality really describe or define ethics. There are also general terms, salihat, all righteous deeds, good actions, and sayyiat, usually referring to bad actions or bad deeds. But they are not really defining or fully covering Islamic ethics or morality. There's another term, akhlaq. Usually Muslims, they use this term, akhlaq. This is the plural of khuluq. Khuluq, simply disposition. The two terms in Arabic that are very close to each other. One is khalq, another one is khuluq. Khalq is physical appearance, meaning the what makes physical aspect of person. But khuluq is related to inner self, or pretty much related to human soul. It's related to our character or manners, or the foundation of our actions. So the disposition is that we call it meleke, is that faculty of the soul, which is the source of all those activities that mankind performs spontaneously without thinking about them. Meleke, or disposition, is a property of the soul which comes into existence through exercise and repetitive practice and is not easily destroyed. So akhlaq is a term referring to practice, virtue, morality, and good manners and character. So it's very broad concept. It's right now I'm trying to give some definition or the meaning of akhlaq or morality or ethics. So what is the importance of morality or ethics in Islam? I'll use prophetic sayings, the words of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and also a verse from the Quran. There are many verses in the Quran referring to the morality, ethics, good manners. So first, he says, "Bu'istu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq." So I was sent to complete, good manners, characters. So what he says, the main mission or main objective to achieve that I was sent is good akhlaq, good manners, characters. So main idea in Islam is that every human being has potential to be good, but it's not, pre-achieved. It's there. There is potential, but it has to be achieved. It has to be work on, and later a person can be, moral being or ethical, or has good manners, good characters, or whatever. In one of the again, the prophet says, the most beloved of you to God is the best of you in character. So what makes a person best or better than others is simply good manners. Another prophetic saying, there is nothing greater in the divine scale than good morals and manners. As you can see, in all these prophetic sayings, it's universal values. It's something that universally applicable to everyone, not just Muslims, but everyone. So truly, the believer can reach, by means of good manners and morals, the degree of one who constantly fasts. So there are some, good deeds. Those good deeds, some of them really, really difficult, especially think about, fasting, holding yourself from drinking and eating. You don't drink, eat whole day in hot summer. You're very thirsty, but you're not allowed to drink water. So if you do this every day, whole year, then there's a chance you can reach the level of, the ethical being or moral person. So here, three basic, layers I like to talk about. So in this way, we will understand what Islam aims to do, or what, Islam really gives to its followers. The first pillar or first layer is Iman. Simply, belief is the core, it's the foundation. So once you believe in God, you make connection and you understand you're not alone. You are here for, there's a divine purpose for you to be here. So it's kind of, it makes you connection. It makes you connect with God. So that's the foundation. And then the second layer or second foundation is Islam. Islam simply practice what is good, or what is ordered, what is commanded by God. But what's the ultimate goal? Okay, you believe in God, you what God commands. What's the ultimate result or goal is akhlaq, morality, ethics. So the question, a person believes in God, a person prays 5 times in a day, observing fasting during month of Ramadan, doing pilgrimage, or doing all sort of religious, rituals, everything, even generous, but at the same time, giving false testimony, harming other people, doing wrong things. It means something is wrong in the first level, second level, and third level is, akhlaq, morality. The result simply, if there was no problem or nothing wrong in two foundational levels, the person would be ethical or moral being. So I'll give you a few, words from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and then also from one verse from the Quran. He says, whoever does not give up false speech and acting upon it, and does not give up offensive speech and behavior, God has no need of his, giving up his food and drink. So earlier I said fasting is really important, very rewarding, spiritual act or ritual. But if a person is not moral being, it harming others and lying, giving false testimony, whatever, the fasting has no value. God does not accept those who do not behave properly, or who, harm others or do wrong things. So the meaning why we observe fasting, to be better person. Why we pray, to better person. Why we visit, the Mecca, we go to do pilgrimage, right? To better person. So everything, every command, every the rule in Islam, to educate people, to make them better, to simply, help them to actualize their potential in terms of being moral or ethical being. And in another word, he says, let he who truly believes in God and the last day speak good or be silent. In the verse, this is very comprehensive verse. Even some scholars, they wrote books just to explain this verse from the Quran, Holy Quran. God enjoins justice and right judgment in all matters, and devotion to doing good and generosity towards relatives, and he forbids you indecency, wickedness, and while conduct all offenses against religion, life, personal property, chastity, and health of mind and body. This explanation in the parentheses is not in actual. He exhorts you repeatedly so that you may reflect and be mindful. So as you can see, this is the ultimate goal that Islam aims to give or educate and make sure every believer every humankind, every human being, they reach this level by following the instructions. So we can easily, conclude that Islamic ethics not only define ethical behavior, but also instructs us in the building of better way of life for the individual and social order. So if a person is good, and then society can be good, and the civilization would be good. Everything starts with each individual, with individual people, and before educating them, before solving the problem in human beings, in each individual, we cannot really, prevent, or we cannot really to stop wars or turmoils or conflicts or fights, whatever you call it, all the evil things going on. So in Islam, human beings are Khalifa, vicegerent, to realize, to, carry out the duty which is called emane. I wrote my dissertation, like there are many, attributes, those are names and attributes used to define God, but some of them are used for human beings, meaning in human dimension, we can represent God's moral, God's ethics, like being generous, being merciful, compassionate, or helping, or whatever, providing. So there are many attributes that indeed we imitate, or we can adapt from God and represent in our world or in our dimension. So to enable mankind for the task of building civilizations, God created us in a way that we can be ethical. We can represent good manners or good character. But we have to do something. It's, as I said, it's not something given at the beginning. People, they have to struggle. They need to work on that. And also society, they work together to achieve this noble goal. I like to finish here. I have few questions. Maybe we can discuss together once at the end Q&A session. My questions: what is the real source of ethics, good manners, or good characters? The first question. A person who does not follow any religion can be ethical. Is it possible to extract universal values from Islam which can be considered global ethics? The last question: although human beings know what's right and what's wrong, why too much evils, corruption, and turmoil in the world? Those are my questions. And
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dogan. Maybe we'll take your questions first, and then I'll have the questions and observations from Dr. Harwood that he prepared. So we'll take your questions first and see if anybody wants to respond. Want to repeat your questions again? Okay. I'll respond to this one. A person who does not follow any religion can be ethical. Anybody want to comment on that one? We do have humanistic ethics, you might say, of people who believe that just being a good human person is, I guess it's finding a golden rule that everybody can agree to based on that you would like to be treated like others to treat you as you're going to treat them. And if that is the rule, that would be a good starting point for humanistic ethics, perhaps.
Jerry, Paul has his hand up.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, it would seem to me the answers to these questions are all rooted in love and its opposite, which is not hate, but fear. They all derive from that. And in the Abrahamic faiths, our foundation is in Christianity, for example, the Jewish Shema Israel, which relates to loving God, and Jesus is alleged to have expanded it into the Golden Rule, which is consistent with all of the various practices that Dr. Dogan has just described in relation to Islam, and are also the practices of Christianity and Judaism, as Rabbi Hillel would have explained. Love and fear.
Thank you. One of the things that happened as Christianity came into the Roman world and was accepted as the religion of the Roman world, there was, when St. Augustine wrote his writings on the two cities, he developed an ethic for the seculars, might say the human city, which was separate from the eternal city of God. And that led to the idea of a just war theory, which now Pope Francis has been questioning as whether you can really have a just war today. This is now, of course, we have this war in Ukraine, which is involving pretty much the whole world one way or the other, where we're all kind of drawn into it. So one question might be, can there still be a just war today based upon, Augustine's theory, or I guess there's also a just war theory in Islam. Both Christianity and Islam have the theory that there can be a possibility of a just war if it's defensive in nature. And that would be, of course, the position I believe that Ukraine would be taking, that they were invaded by Russia, so they have a right to defend themselves. But Pope Francis and some of his followers in the peace movements have said maybe there's a difficulty even having a just war today. That could be a question for discussion too. Anybody want to comment on that? It's becoming a big question in the realm of ethics today, because with the power of weapons are so great, it's hard to contain a war. It tends to spill over. And one of the principles of the just war theory was it cannot be against civilian populations. Well, we know that's not happening. Russia is attacking civilian populations. So we have the international court now, which is trying to uphold a certain ethical principles. And so Russia has been considered in opposition to the principles of the International Criminal Court. So Russia has been targeting President Putin as possibly in violation of the principles of an international just order. So that's a big topic now in the world of ethics. Whether one thing is to say how we comport ourselves as individuals. When Machiavelli wrote his treatise on during the Renaissance period, we have what are called Machiavellian ethics, which is the end justifies the means. And so nations often don't follow ethical principles. They follow what they perceive as a good end for themselves, which might not be moral for individuals. They claim, well, it might be moral for a nation. So beginning with the period of with the breakdown of the Renaissance, where you had, and Reformation era, where you had wars of religion start to enter the world. Not to say there weren't wars of religion, but religious groups started to fight each other. And even today, like for example, in Russia and Ukraine, you have Christianity, the Orthodox religion, but the two groups in each part of Ukraine and Russia don't even agree with each other, even though they're both members of that same religion. So maybe if they could come to some agreement among themselves, that would be a long step toward solving the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But now the whole world is being engulfed in this conflict. So we're dealing with complicated situation. One thing is what we want to do as be moral and ethical as individuals. But part of the goal of the global ethic is how do we spread that ethic to go beyond just the individual, but to include corporations, to include nations, cities, groups of people, where we could help move humanity forward, not just individuals, but whole groups of people. So may I read some of the questions that Dr. Harwood, and if someone wants to come back with any thoughts on, the Parliament of Religions will have about 8,000 people coming to Chicago this summer. And one of the central goals of the Parliament is to get world religions working to ethic to bear in neighborhoods, in cities, in nations, and in the whole world. So we all want to be individually very good people, Dogan mentioned, but how do we bring that to the larger platform of the whole world? And that's. Did anybody want to comment on something? John, you want to? Could you go? If you could mute yourself, John, please. Thank you. Okay, these are the. If you mute yourself, John, please. I'm going to read Dr. Harwood's.
I like to say a few things,
Sure.
Professor Grudzen.
Sure.
I think what I feel the only way that brings some solution to conflicts or turmoils or some hatred or whatever between the followers of three major religions, conflicts or turmoils or some hatred or between the followers of three major religions. My sound is repeating. I don't know what's going on.
I'm trying to get this. John, could you please?
My sound is repeating. I don't know what's going on.
I'm trying to get. John, could you please? Mute him. Go to the participant and mute him. I'm going to mute John Katema here. Just a second. Okay, he's muted now. You can go ahead, Recep.
Okay. So community leaders, religious leaders, or people that others follow and they are inspired, I think they have critical role. And they need to believe that this is the only way, like interfaith dialogue. Why interfaith dialogue, right? So
Right.
Attila, Pacifica Institute, and other, many organizations, they bring us together to learn one from another, and we find out that there are many common points between Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and also Buddhism, or many others. We have many common points, but for some reason, the people, they hate each other. Because they don't know each other much. And in this regard, I think from the Islamic perspective, for example, imams, right? Every Friday they give khutbah, Friday sermon, so they can educate Muslims to encourage them to engage in interfaith dialogue, to learn from other people, and to treat them fairly, equally, whatever, or just to learn from them. Similarly, Christian priests or clergy or monks, whatever, they can do the same, rabbis. So what I'm trying to say is the religious leaders, community leaders, even politicians, I believe, they need to act responsibly rather than spreading hate language or blaming others or creating some enmity or enemy. everyone needs to be careful. Otherwise, the many laymen, they don't know much about their religion, or they're easy to be manipulated. They can be used in wrong direction. So in this regard, the leaders, religious leaders, community leaders, or even politicians, they have huge responsibility. What I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Just to follow up on what you said, Dr. Dogan, the work that Global Ministries has done in Kenya, in the coastal region, follows what you're saying. We worked with religious leaders for almost 10 years because there was a lot of conflict going on between the certain members of the Islamic community and the Christian community, where there was fear on both sides. So working with the interfaith groups there that we worked initially with religious leaders, but then we also started working with teachers and principals to educate the young people, because a lot of the recruitment to violence was coming among the youth. So that work of the Coast Interfaith Council of Clerics, and then we worked with the teachers, and then with the universities and various groups, bore fruit over a period of about 10 years, where these problems pretty much disappeared because all of the community leaders, both the religious leaders, the civic leaders, and the political leaders, because the political leaders felt they needed the support of the religious leaders, because in Africa, religion has a much stronger community base than sometimes it has in other parts of the world. Everybody is pretty much belongs to one religion or another. The two major religions are Christianity and Islam in sub-Saharan Africa. So we found what you're saying is true when the religious leaders and the political leaders are speaking the same type of truth of saying violence is never a solution to problems. We have to solve our problems peacefully. Well, gradually that work has been, I wouldn't say not completely successful, but there's been a marked improvement because of the interfaith dialogue. And the Hizmet movement in Kenya, which you are a part of, has been a large part of it. We work with the Harmony Foundation there, and they have been wonderful in working together with us to develop many of these programs I'm talking about. So, anybody else have any comment on how we spread this message of peace and harmony more broadly? Because it's obviously our world needs it very badly. We have a lot of violence, even in our own American culture. A lot of this, it's not just off in another part of the world. It's right in our own backyard here in the United States. So these are some of the questions that Dr. Sterling Harwood did. He's quoting from Hans Kung's writings. No survival without a world ethic. No world peace without peace between the religions. No peace between the religions without dialogue between the religions. So that's a famous quote from Hans Kung. I'll repeat it again. No survival without a world ethic. No world peace without peace between the religions. No peace between the religions without dialogue between the religions. So interreligious dialogue, he's saying, is the foundation, in a sense, for world peace. If the religions of the world can come together and realize that they share a certain common ethical reality and spread that, then that's a formula for world peace. That's a famous quote that Hans Kung had. And the question that Dr. Harwood has, he says, how come we're surviving without such an ethic? What we have right now is global capitalism, which is competition among the world for goods and services. Economically, he's saying the one principle that seems to rule the world today is global capitalism, not global fraternity. Now, Pope Francis, Global Ministries University has been sponsoring with a university in Africa, in Kenya, a conference on Pope Francis's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which is trying to build a fraternal order based upon peace and justice and human understanding. So we've been doing this now the last 4 years. We've had 2 major conferences with about 2,400 people each time in 19 different countries. So that's another thing that our organization is trying to do, is to build a movement of fraternity and social justice. So everybody feels part of the same community and we're working together for the same goals to build this kind of fraternal and just social order. So anyway, that's a question he has. How come capitalism seems to rule the world, not religion? Global capitalism is, he's saying, isn't that a stronger force in the world today than global peace and justice, maybe? It's a question. His second question is that he's saying, he's questioning whether the world can move forward. It says, he says, I feel responsible toward all churches and religions that he's calling upon the unity of all religions to come together, to work together for one basic ethic. And is that actually happening? Now, the Parliament is a good movement, but it's only one movement in the world, which is often gets drowned out by many other movements. For example, as Dr. Dogan said, many times people operate more out of fear than out of love. So the question is, how do we spread this global ethic? Now, the Parliament is an important institution, but remember, it just got started in '93. Usually global movements need a long time, need like 100 years to really penetrate all of society. We saw how long it took to eliminate slavery, even in the United States. We had slavery up until 1865. And then it went even 2 years after that in Texas. Before it got,
We have slavery in the United States today.
yeah, so we have all these problems. How do we move forward? So he's saying that the world's religions need to come together and form a community of support for this global ethic. Now, that's what the Parliament is trying to do, but it's just one recent, or it's only been around since '93 again. So obviously they're building a movement, which we hope will succeed. He's saying that the world came into being, the modern world came into being with the idea of a Eurocentric world, which was more, Europe pretty much took over Africa and imposed a lot of the European ideas on the African world, and basically occupied many parts of Africa for its own benefit. So much of the world has been formed by one part of the world taking control of the rest of the world, at least economically. So he's saying, can we have a global ethic in a world where the Western world pretty much controls a lot of the dialogue? Most of the big corporations and powerful centers of the world are located either in Europe or now India. Now President Biden is meeting with Prime Minister Modi because India is coming into its own. China, of course, is the last 100 years, India and China. Now India is kind of rising up. So the world is becoming multipolar more. So in this multipolar world, can we have a global ethic? And hopefully, yes, but these are questions that are, Doctor. So again, he mentions that, what do we do about nuclear weapons? Nuclear weapons are proliferating. How do we control nuclear weapons, which can blow up the whole world? So how does the global ethic, when nations like, Iran is trying to have a nuclear weapon and China may want one, or India, these powerful nations, out of whatever reason, are dealing with nuclear weapons. So he mentions other parts of the world, like Japan, have their own way of looking at the world. So this is a multipolar world in which you have different ways of looking at ethics from their cultural perspectives. So the culture, how does culture affect our view of the global ethic? You know, Japan has its way of thinking about these issues. Of course, China is another, which is based upon either communism or you might say some elements of Confucianism. So the global ethic is maybe looked upon in one way in our part of the world, but very different in another part of the world. So he says China changed enough to be part of this global ethical viewpoint because obviously it has adopted elements of capitalism. So these are some questions he's raising that mainly they're cultural questions. Can the global ethic work in a multipolar, multicultural world? Where, you know, the United States is only about 5% of the world. We tend to think of ourselves as, you know, we have the answers. Bill Weisskopf, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did want to say something.
Sure.
We had a saying, the family that prays together stays together. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. I would also say that the family that has good manners stays together. The family that fast and prays stays together. But that's not going to be the solution for the global society. I feel that we need to work together on something that is obvious, and that is climate change. The whole world is faced with the signs of the time are very clear that we need to work, and I think the churches and the various denominations should begin to look at the fact that we all are suffering from nuclear disaster. We're all suffering from a climate, from the destruction of epidemic diseases. We all feel that there's fires and floods and misery. There is also this war. All of these things come down to fighting capitalism, which is money, and getting the churches together to do something together. And I think Pope Francis is trying to say it's climate focus on the world. The world is the gift and the reality of the spirit of life, if you will. Some people even say that the world is that we live in, is we live and move and have our being in God, which is to say we live and have our being in the world. So that if we could ever get the churches to bring together, to work together, to deal with the pollution, the destruction of something that we all have together, which is this climate change, this climate destruction. I think we shouldn't look at it as just something humanistic or something materialistic. It's spiritual. Humanity is basically spiritual, and we need to come together. And I think even the Chinese will realize the smog and their air in China needs to be. And if we could just get capitalism to work for the world through the churches. It's not enough to pray together. I think we need to work together to better the world and the people within the world. And I think the focus should be beyond simply praying together and fasting together and trying to behave ethically. It actually means that we have to do something, and in that work together, we'll find each other and we'll make the world a better place to live. That's my take on it.
The program we're presenting at the Parliament, this is our organization, Global Ministries University, in conjunction with the Harmony Foundation. We're bringing some of our people from Kenya and India, and it's on climate issue. And Marita, my wife, is one of the leaders in the Diocese of San Jose on Laudato Si, the Laudato Si movement. So many of us are involved with these major issues in the world, such as climate change. I don't know if Margie is still here or did she leave? Oh, Margie, you want to say a word about your course that you developed for GMU? Or courses? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I got it. Hi. I wanted to just say a little something about what Bill said too. You know, he's talking about willing to communicate and listen to each other and work together. And, you know, my take on this is that it seems like the sign of the times is we seem to think the important thing is to show who's more right than the other. You know, you hear that in the news and on the politics, even in our own country, we don't seem to be able to agree on a lot of things. You know, you see it in politics, you see it with the climate issues and that kind of thing. And I think it would require a willingness for us to listen to each other, to learn about each other, to learn about our differences and appreciate our differences and respect them. Those are little words that were coming into my head at when he was speaking. But anyway, my class is on, I'm teaching creation spirituality. Also, I have another class. It's called Echo Art and Creation Spirituality, and that's doing activities through a deeper spiritual connection with nature through the concepts of creation spirituality as designed by Reverend Matthew Fox. And I feel that if people are willing to take these courses, they will get a deeper connection with themselves and with each other and with our Creator, and begin to respect all of that and come back around to appreciating our differences and appreciating that we need to take care of nature and that kind of thing. So. But it's, I don't know, I sometimes get discouraged over this because like I said, I see so much arguing going on and a lot less communicating. But that's what I love about Global Ministries University and organizations such as that, because they're working to educate people to understand the importance of coming together like that. Yeah, I was looking at something when you were talking about war too, about is there such a thing as a just war? And I had a thing up, I don't have it up here right now. Thomas Aquinas had mentioned that there are 3 reasons for a just war. But what I got out of that was, if they say for the right reasons, but everybody who goes into a war always thinks they have the right reason.
Right.
You know, they're justified. They're the ones that are fighting evil. So, you know, these are questions I don't know the answers to.
Yeah. Allison, do you have any comments?
Not
One of our
really. I mean,
GMU
I'm
students.
just listening and absorbing. A lot to think about here.
Allison is taking a course in GMU on world religions, so kind of ties in with the Parliament.
Yeah, and you know, my interest is writing for children, and so as I'm listening to this, my brain's going with, you know, how can we, you know, for instance, and I've shared this with Dr. Grudzen. I've put together a collection of sacred texts from people, you know, from faiths all over the world, and it's been sort of fascinating and disheartening to see how that's been rejected by publisher after publisher. Because to me, that's
We
such a
should talk
basic.
about that, Allison, because GMU now is starting to do its own publications. So maybe next time we talk, we can talk about that.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I'd love to see it happen because I think, for kids to pick up on the positives and just develop a positive feeling about their own scriptures as well as other people's seems sort of a basic starting place.
Let's talk about it when we have our next Zoom session.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you.
Susanna, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, this is my first time, so I'm just listening. I
Okay.
attended, but this is great. This group is
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Attila, did you want to say anything? Attila?
Well, thank you, Dr. Grudzen. This has been great listening to all of you. And hope this kind of talks continue, and then like to collaborate and then send it to our database to spread the word about these events.
Yeah, we'll have more of these events going forward, and we hope to partner with Pacifica on them too. So we look forward. I don't know if you're coming to the Parliament of Religions, but we'll have quite a number of people there in Chicago.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be there.
Good. We'll be there too. Look us up. We have a booth there. And it's in conjunction with Harmony Institute in Kenya. They're partnering with us on that.
Looking forward.
Okay. Melissa, did you have any thoughts you want to share?
I thank you for inviting me. This is my first Zoom seminar with GMU, and so I've just been trying to absorb everything and listen attentively. Personally, I'm very inspired by the desire to pull together for what is good and what is right and what is universally good. And so I hope and pray that this would have a trickle-down effect, that each of us would be the light where we are. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Sylvia has her hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sylvia?
Okay, I'm just getting set up here. So what I think that the Declaration for Global Ethic is a wonderful step in the right direction. And I think we all agree with that. And as you say, how can we move not just a few individuals, but the whole society of groups of people, whether they're religions or nations or whatever groups. And I think when you're calling upon the unity of all religions, that was in one of the, I believe, one of the questions of one of the professors that you mentioned. And really the unity of all religions is beyond the what is it? Beyond what the religions profess. It's the ground of being that the perennial philosophy talks about. And if we can get the individuals, sufficient numbers of individuals, into the ground of all being, the individuals are the unit of society. So when the individuals are established in the ground of all being and begin to act from that level, then the interfaith dialogue will be facilitated and people from all religions, we get them into this ground of all being, into the transcendental field that's underlying everything. There is the unity. That's where the unity is. That's the basis of all the religions. That's the basis of all these ethics that we've been discussing. The source of all these ethics. So
On that point, the next seminar we're going to do on religion and science, and on two books. One is Hans Kung's book on religion and science, and the other is The Language of God, which is on Dr. Collins' book. He's the founder of the Biologos, which is a religion and science. And so in Kung's book on religion and science, he talks about ground of being, or the primal mystery, as perhaps something that can unite everyone. Because what is the source of the whole universe of creation? It has to have some singularity, some source of all reality is founded in the idea of something transcendent, and that we call God in the monotheistic religions. Others may give it some other name, but there's no way to get away from it, that this reality of the whole universe, science has given us such a tremendous understanding that the universe is expanding, and it goes back 13.7 billion years. So we're going to have a session on, which is one of the new programs. We have almost now 50 people with GMU studying religion and science, both in Kenya and in India, and a few now in the United States. So that's one of our signature programs. And we like to do one on a couple of the main authors now who've written extensively on this. Francis Collins, the former head of the National Health Institute. He's now founded this organization called Biologos. And Hans Kung work on the religion and science. He's written extensively on that also. And
now, what did you say Francis Collins' book was? What's the name?
The Language of God. The Language of God.
Okay.
It's on the human genome. Although he talks about it's all on religion and science, but it's a wonderful book. I'd recommend it.
Okay.
By Dr. Francis Collins. Yeah. So the next one we'll do is on what he started with the Biologos movement, which is interesting because he's involving fundamentalist Christians. It isn't out of the Catholic world or the Muslim world, it's out of another whole world, which is evangelical Christianity. He's trying to bring them into awareness of the climate crisis using science. But he's also an evangelical Christian. So we have to reach out to all these different religious groups and find ways to link with them around these big issues like the climate. So we'll have a program on that. Just one other thing, former Governor Jerry Brown was part of our first big international conference. He has an organization which is working with the Chinese on climate issues. Might say under the radar, because there's not much going on recently between China and the US, but he has been able to continue a dialogue with the Chinese people on how we can work together to solve the climate issues, because if we don't all work together, we're all going to fall together.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's so important to get people to a place that is underlying everyone. And then on that level, they'll have common experience. And from that common experience, they can understand and interpret their own scriptures and see the value in the tenets of other religions. So it really helps to support all of the interfaith dialogue and all of the discussions on climate change and everything else. And there have been research, like over 50 scientific research studies have been done now, demonstration projects and so, where people have come together as a group to create an effect on a larger population. And they do this by practicing the Transcendental Meditation program to allow people, a group of people, to like stimulate that field. And because consciousness, that field, that transcendental field is a field of consciousness, it stimulates that with all people, even without dialogue. They've been able to see effect on reducing war deaths and creating more peaceful environment, even without direct physical interaction. There's also been a number of indicators of reduced crime, reduced accidents, a lot of different indicators, social indicators that improve when there are a group of people, especially a group practicing together, is more powerful. But even when you have individuals practicing by themselves, there still has been shown to be an effect when there's sufficient numbers of those, because they're contacting this transcendental field that's underlying everything.
I see it's about 5:15 now, so I think we'll kind of wrap up now, but thank you, all of you, for participating. And I want to thank Dr. Dogan. I don't know if you're still with us, Dr. Dogan, but thank you for your presentation. And there'll
Thank
be
you
a,
so much, Professor
thank you
Grudzen.
for your presentation. And we'll look forward, as I said, we'll have another program probably at the time of the Parliament. So we can do, bring you, those of you who cannot come to the Parliament, we'll have a program that will stream during the Parliament, which is the week of August 14th to the 18th. So GMU will have several of our staff there and our students, but we'll also do another session like this on, since we're presenting on religion and science. And Dr. Dogan, you're welcome to come because you have a lecture on religion and science, correct?
Yes.
So the next one, if you could do something on religion and science, and I'll do something on, that'll be the topic of the program we'll do at the time of the Parliament, which will be, probably we'll do it on either the 15th or 16th of August. I'll let you know. I have to talk with our staff, but we'll do a program right from the Parliament and live stream it on Facebook and then on Zoom.
Sure.
Did you have any final thoughts? Did you get a chance to speak, Judy Clarence?
I didn't hear you. Well, I thank you and Dr. Dogan for your presentations, and I think they were both. The only thing I would add is the difficulty of getting people who are so entrenched in their own religious tradition to step out of it and look at the validity and beauty of the other traditions and what we all have in common. And I think that's always the challenge, is that so many people are out of ignorance and out of misinformation.
It's not easy, but we have to keep working at it.
Right.
Thank
both of you.
And I went to a program by the BioLogos Foundation in here in the Bay Area, and they worked with many of the churches to get people out. They had 600 people come to a program on the environment, and these are people who ordinarily aren't that interested in the environmental issues, but they brought out six at a theater in Redwood City with 600, and it was a wonderful program.
How did they get them to come? How did they get them to?
They have funding through they flood an area with their staff and meet with all the churches in that area and ask them to come to this big meeting. But they have from the Templeton Foundation, $10 million funding. And so they can go and flood a whole area with their message of the different churches to get them to come out and attend this session, which was wonderful on climate change. Which you don't usually think of evangelical Christians, coming out on an evening to hear about climate change. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Dogan. Thank you for everybody. And we hope you'll join us at the time of the Parliament. And Allison, I'll look forward to talking with you about your your project.
Thank you, Dr. Grudzen.
Thank you, Attila.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Good evening now.